How's it going, guys? We're going to do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison of the NA naturally aspirated L36 3800 and the Firebird, and the L67 Supercharged 3800 and the Buick. So you can probably pretty obviously see these are two totally different cars. However, the engines are actually extremely similar. So the L67 is pictured here. You got the big blower on top. It looks a little bit different than the L36, but when you start to look real close, you can see a lot of similarities, like the alternator in the same spot. The accessory belt routing is pretty similar. The distributor coils there in a very similar spot. Exhaust manifolds look similar. Spark plugs are all the same. So you really start to see a lot of similarities here. Now the big difference is the intake on the front wheel drive L67 is on what would be the back of that car. So as you can see here, the intake comes off here and goes to the driver's side. And then the accessory belt is over here, all that routing. Now on the Firebird, the intake and the accessories are all on the same side. So on the front wheel drive, they're on the opposite side, which is why it's quite difficult to put one of these blowers on that car. So now obviously this is longitudinally mounted in a rear wheel drive car, and this is transversely mounted in a front wheel drive car. So you can't compare the transmissions or anything like that. But other than the transmissions and whatnot, they're actually completely interchangeable. So if I could take the heads and the intake and the supercharger off the L67 and I could bolt it onto that car, but like I said, it would be very difficult to actually make it work because I would have to make my own intake setup that comes around under the windshield and then goes all the way back to the front, which would be nothing short of a huge hassle. But people have done it. The front wheel drive ones, the back cylinder bank's a little bit more difficult to get to change spark plugs and whatnot. The front is obviously very accessible. On the Firebird, both banks are about equally difficult. But you got a lot more room in this one than in an LS1. You can get to your spark plugs and whatnot, but it's not the most fun thing in the world to do. But as you can see, you got a big gap here in there where a V8 would usually go. So you got a lot more space. But yeah. So the heads, the intake, and obviously the supercharger is what separates these. So to put a supercharger on an NA 3800, you got to swap the heads and the intake over and all that good stuff. And the bottom ends are actually slightly different. 3800 L67 is known to have a slightly more robust bottom end, but they're both pretty equal in strength. Now the L36 does have 9.3 to 1 compression, and the L67 does have 8.5 to 1 compression. So it's a slight drop in compression, but they did that so it was safer to run the supercharger on it. But I'll give you a good look here. Pretty similar once you really start to look, even though they're in two completely different cars. But it's pretty amazing how much use GM got out of the 3800s. So they put them in just about anything that didn't have an LS. And there's a good reason why. Both of these cars get about 30 miles a gallon. This run, the L67 Supercharged, does have to run on premium gas. I'm sure many people will say otherwise, but I always think it's a good idea to run what you're supposed to. But they get about the same fuel economy, just this one runs on premium, so it is a little more expensive, but you're talking a 40 horsepower increase and a 60 pound-feet of torque increase. And it's amazing to drive the two cars and see how different they feel, even though the engine is nearly the same. Just because of that blower on the L67 gives you that torque right off the idle, and it gets up and goes a lot better than the naturally aspirated variant, even though that car is nearly 1,000 pounds heavier than this one. So torque is what does it as far as performance. But yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool to see them side by side. See the differences and the similarities between the two. So yeah, thanks for watching.